I'm representing not just Karma Capital, but also the industry. The industry has come together. All the foreign fund managers of Indian origin, as well as the resident Indian fund managers. And this is the first time we have formed an association called Asset Managers Roundtable of India. And we're speaking with one voice. So just to be sure, I'm batting for the industry and not my own personal interests, although they are very much at stake here. It's for us an existential issue, to be or not to be. And the way things stand, it's not going to be. And that's not good. And I think that one of the things, the reason why Nishit and I had the press conference today is to really raise the profile of this issue, because although it's been trickling in the press, there really hasn't been a full-on understanding of what's at stake. And maybe the powers that be don't realize what's at stake, especially in an election year. I mean, the unintended consequence of this circular is that about $75 billion of investment will have to be unwound, and therefore the stock market...
Just explain the issue for us from a very basic standpoint. I mean, you floated a company, right? I mean, Karma Capital.
Yeah.
You have, and it's an offshore fund, which is basically people from all around the world invest in that fund. It is your company, so you have management control, right? So you're the beneficial owner of the fund. So what is the SEBI circular saying right now with regards to this situation?
Absolutely. In fact, let me just break that question down into two parts, because what the circular is saying, on one hand, are these threshold triggers that will determine who is the beneficiary owner of this sort of investment vehicle. They can be 15%, they can be 10%, they can be 25%, depending on how you are looking at the structure of the trust.
That's from an economic interest standpoint.
Absolutely, that's one aspect. And then there is the actual management and control, where you as head of Karma Capital may not have more than 15% economic interest, yet are exercising managing control.
Correct.
Where does the problem lie?
The problem is that no institutional investor or anybody would give money to an entity that doesn't have a controlling person. Right, so there has to be a fund manager in charge, and the minute you say I'm the fund manager in charge and I'm of Indian origin, the circular says, well, you can't be. Right, you cannot utilize the FPI route to bring in investments into India. So there's a basic problem. So
Nandita Parker cannot be the fund manager for Karma Capital. It'll have to be a foreigner. I mean, that is fine.
Exactly. So anybody of Indian origin, even if they're 10% Indian, cannot be a fund manager
of offshore money. Of
offshore money coming through the FPI route into India. So what that means, so NRIs, right, if they want to invest in India, they would not come through my fund, they could come through a foreign fund. A Nigerian could set up a fund and invest in through the FPI route. A Russian could do it, but I, who have been postulating the India investment case for 25 years, wrote the first India strategy report in 1995, and have been an ambassador for India, can't do it.
Even Indian entities like Edelweiss, Reliance, Birla, who essentially may have floated overseas funds, and they have fund managers sitting here in India. How do they get impacted? Because there is a clear owner, right? I mean, if it is Reliance, which is floated Reliance Mutual Fund, I mean, the beneficial owner would be Reliance Capital. I mean, how does this impact?
So resident Indians are also banned from managing foreign money?
Yes.
As per the circular?
As per the circular.
What about somebody, GMO, for example, right? I mean, which invests into India, has got somebody out of Singapore managing money into India. I mean, would they also get impacted? I'm
not sure, but quite likely.
But let me ask you a very simple question, Nandita. Just to understand what the basic grouse is, would you, and of course some of the members of the association, would they be okay with the owning entity, the single Indian entity, owning less than 15%? So the thresholds are not a problem then?
So there's three thresholds.
3 thresholds. 10% if it's a high-risk jurisdiction.
25, 15, and 10. By the way, the high-risk jurisdiction is not actually been clarified as yet. So that's an issue that's out in the open. I mean, there's enough ambiguity in the circular. It's not something that you and I can sit and negotiate here.
Sure.
I mean, it really needs to be looked at in terms of an overall holistic picture from different standpoints. Like you said, does it impact GMO? Does it impact Enam? Does it impact so and so? The point is, what are you trying to achieve? PMLA does not prohibit anybody from using the FPI route. It's only for KYC, which we are happy to disclose and provide KYC. So therefore, it cannot be used or misused or misinterpreted by another agency.
Yeah, Nandita, what should be the threshold? I mean, if we get down to it, 10, 15%, as Surabhi pointed out, that works?
So, I mean, those are something that we've lived with, okay? We haven't had a discussion on those thresholds in particular, so I'm not at liberty to really speak for my peer group. But I think a certain reasonable amount should be allowed as seed capital from a sponsor. You know, so 25% as seed capital, and the government is well aware.
What are the norms right now? I mean,
for seed capital?
Yeah, I mean,
there aren't any.
Okay.
I mean, the government themselves has become a sponsor of their sovereign wealth fund, so they should know that when you float a fund, that outside investors expect the fund manager to put up some substantial skin in the game. And now, if you say, okay, for the government, the skin in the game is, you know, 20% or whatever, or globally accepted, there is no norm as such, but about 25% sounds reasonable. But for Indians, it should be 5% or 3% or 2.5%, some random number. I mean, again, where does that come from? Okay, and what are you trying to achieve? This is the whole point of it. And also there is a question of NRIs coming in, right? Earlier there was sort of a notion that, you know, there can be almost an unlimited NRI investment in any fund, or most of us thought of that as something like a 50% limit. So we kind of went by that as an industry practice more than a given threshold. We kind of took it at that. Now, if you say, you know, there's a question of that limit, and NRIs can only go through another route, through a foreign fund manager. The first problem with that limit is that how do you define NRI, and which form should I have, and what checkbox should it have? Should it be based on a person's race? And if they are 10% NRIs, you know, if their grandfather was a person of Indian origin, I mean, this is craziness. I have never heard of any country discriminating against its own people. This is what this circular has amounted to. When I've discussed it globally with investors, they are shocked, and I am sorry to tell you, I'm ashamed of having to explain this to people, that anybody sitting over here in India would come up with something like this.